and a lot of parents won't want to admit this, but parents will think like, my kid is bigger. If they were smaller, they'd fit in more. Or they might think, well, if I help my kid look a certain way, dress a certain way, they'll fit in more. That's not the goal. The goal is to raise kids who are confident in who they are, regardless of the external expectations on them. And so again, we're going for the long game here. So how do we influence our children? How do we empower our children and build resilience so that when they go out and there is pressure on them to look a certain way, to, fit in a certain way, to eat a certain way, whatever that is, how can we buffer that effect so that they can remain true to themselves?
Ever feel like you suck at this job? Motherhood, I mean. Have too much anxiety and not enough patience? Too much yelling, not enough play? There's no manual, no village, no guarantees. The stakes are high. We want so badly to get it right. But this is survival mode. We're just trying to make it to bedtime. So if you're full of mom guilt, your temper scares you, you feel like you're screwing everything up, and you're afraid to admit any of those things out loud, this podcast is for you. This is Failing Motherhood. I'm Danielle Bettman, and each week we'll chat with a mom ready to be real, sharing her insecurities, her fears, her failures, and her wins. We do not have it all figured out. That's not the goal. The goal is to remind you, you are the mom your kids need. They need what you have, you are good enough, and you're not alone. I hope you pop in earbuds, somehow sneak away, and get ready to hear some hope from the trenches. You belong here, friend. We're so glad you're here. Hey, it's Danielle. Whether you are a parent that grew up with a really skewed body image, that struggled to see yourself the way that others saw you, or you were constantly comparing your body to friends or movie stars, or got really sucked in to diet culture, or you're a parent concerned with a child that's beginning to struggle in any one of those ways, or you simply want to prevent your child from struggling in that way, you are in for a huge treat today. I am talking to Dr. Alli Delozier. She's a clinical psychologist with specializations in child and pediatric psychology. Alli is passionate about equipping children and adolescents with the skills they need to have a positive relationship with food and their bodies. Her parent coaching programs focus on helping parents unlearn the constraints of diet culture so that they can empower their kids and teens to live confidently in their bodies, free of the harmful effects of negative body image and disordered eating. In this episode, I couldn't help but dive into her experience with failing motherhood first, which brought us to a really important conversation about postpartum OCD and intrusive thoughts. And she shares specific red flags to be concerned with if you experience this common phenomenon. Her first year of motherhood was, in her words, a dumpster fire. She describes that journey that she did not see coming. Then we get to the nitty-gritty of developing healthy relationships with food and our bodies as parents. She shares how important language neutrality is, along with a lot of examples, and modeling, not only with food, but with our body commentary as well. Dr. Alli supports parents who have struggled with their body image, self-esteem, or dieting in the past and don't want to pass that struggle on to their child, as well as parents who are already noticing their child struggling with their relationship to food or their body that want advanced strategies and support to help their child. I can't wait for you to dive in and hear all of her wisdom. So let's go. Welcome to Failing Motherhood. My name is Danielle Bettman, and on today's episode, I'm joined by Alli Delozier. Hi, Alli. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. I'm so glad you're here, and we are going to give listeners like a disclaimer up front. My voice is cracking. It's been a week of getting over a cold, and so you might find that annoying. And Alli's got a kiddo that is sick in the background, and she might have something in her voice herself. So you'll just have to bear with us. This is it's that time of year.
It's the perfect failing motherhood situation going on here.
This is the reality. This is the reality of day-to-day motherhood. We are in it.
Absolutely.
Yes. Okay. So before we start diving into your story and your expertise and all that good stuff, go ahead and just reintroduce yourself to my listeners and let them know who you are and who is in your family.
Great. Yeah. So I am Alli Delozier. I have a PhD in clinical psychology with specializations in clinical child and pediatric psychology. And so that professionally, that's what I do, what I focus on. I work a lot with parents. I'm also a parent coach. So, I'm a child psychologist and I'm a parent coach, and parent coach is more focused on helping parents develop skills, as you know. And then in my family, I'm married for, 5-ish years. We've been together forever. And then I have 2 children. So I have an almost 3-year-old and an almost 5-month-old. So little ones in my house, a boy and a girl.
Such fun ages. That's so fun.
Oh, yes. So much fun and so much challenge.
And that's what we're here to talk about. Yes. So have you ever felt like you were failing motherhood? I have to pre-qualify with that question because you have a PhD behind your name.
Yeah. Dr. Delozier. No, I've never felt like I failed motherhood, right? Like only maybe every other hour, right? Like it's kind of, is there a time that I don't feel like I'm failing would probably be a better situation for me. So of course, yeah. And I mean, there's always something, right? Like you're learning as you go. And even with a doctorate degree in clinical psychology and with specializations in children, I feel like half the time I'm still in school. Like I'm still learning. I'm like, oh, I didn't know a 3-year-old would do that. Okay. Let's adapt.
Yes. Lots of winging it, lots of adapting as you go, learning from your kids. I was in the same boat where I was a teacher, working in classrooms. I was home visiting. I was working with families and I was like, I got this. And then I had my own kids.
Yes. Yeah. And it's so funny too. It's like the same way I wouldn't do therapy on myself, right? Like if I need therapy, I go get a therapist. I can't really coach myself with my kids as well, just because I'm an expert in the field. And I'll use that term loosely, doesn't mean that motherhood comes easily or that I always know what to do with my children or that I always choose to do the thing that I know I should do, right? So yeah, I think it's tough for all of us. And with all the pressures and the, ridiculous expectations that we place on moms, it's the hardest job.
Oh, understatement of the year. Yes. So take us along your journey of motherhood, and then we'll dive into kind of your specialty of why you're here. Had you always wanted to be a mom? Who were you before kids?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, I always anticipated having children and knew I wanted to. And so when I finished my graduate degree and was finishing up my residency, it seemed like a great time to start a family, kind of going into my faculty position and, kind of pre-licensed. So I was like, okay, this is going to work out really great. I knew I wanted to have more than one kid so I can have my first kid and then have some time to get licensed and work towards tenure. And then we can think about more babies. And so I had my first baby at the very end of 2019, which means I went back from maternity leave in March of 2020. Dun, dun, dun. We all know what happened then. And so my motherhood experience was really colored by the pandemic. And I was working at an academic medical center as a psychologist there and a researcher there. And so it was tough. It was really tough going back and with all the uncertainty. And on top of that, being a psychologist does not protect you from experiencing mental health challenges. And I had my first was born and we were in the hospital. We had a little bit of a traumatic experience. And then after that, I developed postpartum OCD, which is where you experience a lot of intrusive thinking and anxiety. So there's a lot of obsessive thoughts that typically are about your baby's health and safety. And that's what it was for me. And even though I am a psychologist, I didn't really recognize the degree to which I was experiencing that and suffering. And so my early motherhood experience is really characterized by that. And my challenges were all around my baby's health and safety and well-being. And then enter this novel new virus. Oh my goodness. I didn't know how I was going to get to survive, just the anxiety of that. And having to send my kid to daycare and working in healthcare, it was really tough for me. And then my funding gets pulled. that was promised when I came on because of a clerical error, of course. So it was just like this horrible just storm of like all the things that could go wrong.
What?
Yes, yes. I had a startup package and the university was, everything. It's hard to think back now, but at that point in March of 2020, everybody was in the red. All of the hospitals were in the red and they were going into emergency mode and they were locking down funds. And so like my funding was locked down and I didn't know when I was going to be able to open it up, get access to my funds again, to do the research that I needed, to get tenure, to get promotion, And so, I was a new faculty, new mom. It was really tough. Looking back now, it's kind of crazy how it all happened. But that experience, we were so lucky to have our health and to, so many people really struggled during that time. And I got through it and things got better. And then we made the decision to actually move back home and to buy a farm. And so we really, I think that experience brought us a lot of clarity in what we wanted out of our lives and what we wanted our lives to look like. And end with, the advent of remote work, what I realized that I didn't have to necessarily work within this academic setting so far away from my family. And I could kind of blend the two things. And so, here we are now, a couple of years later with another kid. And in a lot of ways, it was kind of a blessing, I think, to go through that so quickly and just to kind of get hit in the face with all of the challenges at once and then get through them. But that's where we are now.
Wow. Oh my gosh. So
sorry, that was like a really long, like looping story.
No, that's exactly what we're here to hear. Yeah. Because not only is the first year of motherhood always a roller coaster, no matter who you are, because you have no idea what you're getting into and everyone's experience is so unique, but for you to be in the throes of that mental health struggle and work struggle and global, completely unknown pandemic, that is a lot. I think you summed it up in like your form for the submission for like this episode of like, my first year of motherhood was a dumpster fire.
Yeah. Yes, it was. Looking back, it's just, I'm like, I can't believe all of that happened. Like, wow, what a ride.
For real.
But that's the thing about being a mom, right? Is like, you just get through it. We are so tough. We just make it through what we got to make it through.
Yeah. Yeah. So connect a few dots for us. Like, how did you end up realizing how deep you were in some of those mental health struggles? How did you end up getting help? What did that look like?
Yes. So, I'm actually really embarrassed to say that it took a long time for me to gain clarity around what I was experiencing. Unfortunately, postpartum mood and anxiety disorders are not something that is really taught at the graduate level. So it's something I had very little training in, maybe a few seminars. And then, of course, I was familiar with things like intrusive thinking, which are thoughts that you experience that are distressing or unwanted, and they are difficult to get rid of. You want to get rid of them, but maybe they keep coming back or they bring you distress. And so that would be something like thoughts about SIDS, maybe having a baby that could experience SIDS, or a thought that some people will have a thought like when they're driving down the road, what if I just jerked my car over? That's an intrusive thought because it comes out of nowhere and you don't want it. And so that's what OCD is characterized by, is those intrusive or obsessive thoughts. And then it looks different in postpartum, right? It's not kind of that stereotypical OCD you would think of when we hear the, obsessive compulsive disorder, when we hear that term. And so I've always kind of had some high functioning anxiety. And so it's just like, oh, this is just postpartum anxiety. It's just intrusive thinking. 95% of moms have intrusive thinking in the postpartum period, and kind of just pushed through it. And I never really gave voice to some of those fears that I had, because I did, even knowing everything I know, and as much as I want to destigmatize mental health struggles, I felt like I shouldn't be having these thoughts. I shouldn't be worrying so much about my baby. What's wrong with me as a mom that I feel like I can't keep my baby safe? What's wrong with me as a mom that, everybody else seems to be enjoying this so much more, and all I do is sit here and worry? And so I didn't want to tell anyone. And then, I did eventually kind of start to reach out, and I did my own screening on myself. And then later on, I finally decided to work with my own therapist. And again, I'm embarrassed to say, but as a psychologist, this was my first experience with therapy. And so I actually started working with a therapist to move through the traumatic experience of my first kid's birth so that I could prepare for pregnancy and have another baby and have a good postpartum mental health plan. And I'm happy to say that my postpartum experience with number 2 was, very, very much different. And that's something I want like anybody who's listening to know, is that if you struggled with postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, stress, a traumatic birth with one of your children, do reach out for help. Don't assume it's normal. If you are bothered or distressed or hurting, reach out for help. That means it's worth it. And then know that it doesn't have to be that way with any subsequent births if there are any.
Yeah. So important to hear from a mom who's been there, because we get told all day long, take a bubble bath, get a massage, take care of yourself. But like, really, what does that look like when it comes to being in the throes of something that feels like it's personal? It feels like it's your fault. That feels like there's shame. That feels like it's embarrassing, especially if you are a professional. Then there's just so many more layers and ramifications to the levels of struggle it is to receive the help, or just to even acknowledge and accept where you're at and be able to see clearly. So I think stories are the most powerful way to be able to share what that looks like, and to be able to normalize that experience, and to know, I think you said that it's normal to feel like you're failing, but not all the time, or that your world is crashing down at times, but not all the time. And if it does feel all the time, that's more of your indicator that, something else is wrong that you can't control.
Yes, absolutely. As a psychologist, I really try not to pathologize everything, right? So it's normal to have ups and downs, and to have different moods, and to feel like you're having, especially with the expectations that are placed on mom, right? Moms to feel like maybe you're failing. If that you're feeling that way more than not, if it's causing you impairment in your daily living, if it's causing you to not have the joy you used to have, if you find yourself, worrying or stressing more than you used to, that is a time to seek out support or seek out help, get an evaluation, contact someone. Just even if it's just to get a screening, right? It doesn't mean you have to move forward with anything, but just know that there are supports out there, and you're not failing, right? So the system is failing you. If you feel that way, the system is failing you. So don't put it on yourself, put it on the system, and then go find some help.
Yes. And as for those intrusive thoughts, what is to be expected, and what is kind of the goal treatment-wise if you're experiencing those?
Yes. And I will say, I'm not a specialist in treating this, so I'll talk more of my lived experience. Mm-hmm. But when you experience, it is normal to have intrusive thoughts. And most moms say they have at least one. And so that is when you're cooking dinner and your kid is in the jumper or the bouncer on the floor, and you think, what if I drop this knife and it hit my baby, right? That would be an intrusive thought. And you'd be like, oh goodness, why did I think that? I don't want to have this thought. What does that mean about me? You might go down the path, or you might see it as an intrusive thought and just be like, oh, that was weird, and move on. Now, when those thoughts are taking up a substantial amount of your time in your day, so for OCD, it's over an hour a day. If you're spending time engaging with these thoughts, if they're distressing or causing you impairment in your daily living, then that would be, cause to get an evaluation for OCD. But if they are bothering you, if you're having them frequently, if they are causing you to feel distressed, that is a time to seek support, right? If, for me, it would look like maybe I would have a thought and it would bother me a little bit, but it would go away. Or I would do a compulsive act. So I'd have the thought and then I'd move my kid 10 feet away from me. Because I'm like, I can't sit here and chop these vegetables. I'm too anxious. I'm going to drop this knife, if that's what it was. Or then maybe I would come back at the end of the day. I'd lay down in bed and I'd think about this situation over and over and over in my mind. And that's the nature of it. It's intrusive, right? And the more you try to push it away, the more it comes back. And so there are a lot of excellent techniques you can learn to cope with these thoughts and to reduce them over time. There are also, medication options as well. And so again, you don't have to live with that. I wish I would have reached out sooner instead of living with that. It's painful to have those thoughts. And I wish I would have reached out sooner instead of living with that. And so that's what I would just tell anyone. If it's causing you problems or impairment, reach out.
Yeah. And that's so scary. It's so scary for everybody.
It is. It's a terrible thing. And I haven't talked about this much. So I appreciate, getting the opportunity to come and talk about this on here, because it's also something that's very stigmatized. And I think it's really important that we talk about it, knowing that most moms will have these thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because it's a lot more common than you may expect if you don't talk to your friends about it.
Exactly. And people don't talk about it because they find these thoughts to be shameful, because they'll think, why did I have a thought about my baby getting sick? Why did I have a thought about my baby getting hurt? What does that mean about me? Instead of recognizing that it's actually probably evolution protecting your baby. And it never means, if these are unwanted thoughts, it never, ever, ever means you want to hurt your baby. That's the biggest thing. People are scared to reach out for help because they think that someone's going to believe they're having these thoughts about hurting their baby. That's not what intrusive thinking or postpartum OCD is. That would be maybe like psychosis or a completely other realm. These are thoughts you don't want to have. You are doing everything you can to not do these things, right? When I move my kid 10 feet across the room so that I don't drop something on him, that's me doing everything I can to keep my kid safe. And so I really want to know that if anyone is having these thoughts, again, it's protective. It's just gone too far.
Yeah, right. And you deserve to have more sanity. You deserve to feel more okay around your baby.
Yeah, to have some peace and enjoy that baby.
Hey, if you're new here, I'm Danielle. My company, Wholeheartedly, offers one-on-one and group coaching programs to help families with strong-willed kids age 1 to 7 prevent tantrums, eliminate power struggles, extend their patience, and get on the same page. It's kind of like finances. You can read lots of info about what a Roth IRA is and how the stock market works. But if you really want to get serious about paying down debt or growing your wealth, you go see a financial advisor who can give you very specific recommendations based on all the unique facets of your situation. I'm your financial advisor for parenting, and I've designed the way we work together to give you nothing less than a complete transformation. While we work together, I'm able to help you figure out why your child is losing their mind and why you are losing your mind, and guide you to master effective long-term solutions through 3 main focuses. Number 1, my Cultivating Cooperation guide teaching you the tools of positive discipline. Number 2, managing your mind by working through my Triggers workbook. And number 3, establishing your family's foundation by writing your family business plan. My coaching is comprehensive, practical, individualized, and full of VIP support. So, if you struggle to manage your child's big emotions, if you and your partner's arguments seem to center around parenting, especially if one of you is too kind and one of you is too firm, if you struggle to stay calm and be the parent that you want to be, it's possible to stop feeling like a deer in headlights when a tantrum hits, effortlessly move through simple directions and care routines without an argument, and go to bed replaying the way you handled the hardest moments and feel proud. If you have a deep desire to be the best parent you can be, and your family is your greatest investment, find me on Instagram, send me a message that says sanity, and I'll ask you a few questions to see if we'd be a good fit to work together. I can't wait to meet you. Back to the show. No, I'm so grateful for your vulnerability and being able to share that, for something that is so stigmatized, because it takes people going first to be able to maybe have a listener start a conversation, with a provider, with a friend, or with their partner about this, and be able to feel more okay with starting that conversation as a result of hearing this. So I so appreciate that window into your world. And I'm so grateful that you've been able to have a much better experience with your second. I'm sure, COVID being a little more under wraps helped a little bit, but was there anything else that you did in the meantime between your first and your second that helped you acclimate or feel like you were able to have more of the experience that you were looking for?
Yeah. I think the biggest difference for me was, I don't know how the best way to word this is, but I really kind of invested in myself in between that first and second baby. So just trying to take better care of myself, and not from, like you said, right, there's always this kind of superficial, like take a bubble bath, kind of go for a walk, self-care. But I went to physical therapy to manage chronic pain when I was pregnant. I started doing psychotherapy so that I could feel confident with my choices and decisions with my second baby was a home birth, and it was something I really wanted to do and I was really afraid to do. And so I needed some support in getting there. I made a mental health plan. I got a few massages to help manage stress. And so those are things that it's really easy as moms to say, I don't deserve that. I don't have time for that. I shouldn't need these things. And I just, I really pushed back on those thoughts. And I said, and tried to say, this is helping me be a better mom. This is helping me feel better. This is going to help my postpartum experience be a better experience. And I really do think that made a huge difference in what that experience with baby number 2 looked like for me.
Oh, I can only imagine. There has to be a direct correlation for a lot of those things, not just any one thing, but the culmination of that investment that you said, investment in yourself, in being able to help you become the person that was ready to try again and to be able to do that scary thing of labor again. Mm-hmm. That's a really big deal, not only mentally, but physically. And so for you to be able to have invested in that process in the meantime, while you're, moving on a farm and, raising a 1-year-old and all those other minor details, running your practice, that's a lot to juggle.
Yeah.
And I think you worded it really well again in your form. So I wanted to share this again so you could speak more on it. You said, I could not have prepared for the emotional impact of having kids or how much motherhood pushes you to grow as a person. For a psychologist who thought she was relatively emotionally healthy, I've had to do a lot of work on myself. So just speak to that a little bit more.
Yes, absolutely. I think, motherhood, it pushes you, it transforms you in so many ways. And then you can kind of rise to that challenge, right? Or it can feel very defeating at times. And we do both, right? We rise and we get defeated. But nobody talks about that before you're a mom, right? Nobody says oh, you're going to have to learn how to self-regulate your emotions because you think you know how to do that. But wait until you see your kid, yourself reflected in your kid. And you have to figure out how to calm yourself before you can calm your kid. Mm-hmm. Or wait until your kid is doing something that terrifies you, right? Like climbing up the swing set and you're afraid they're going to fall and hit their head, but you also know that you have to let them do things and you don't want your fear to be their fear, right? And so I did not realize how much I would have to work to manage my own emotions so that I could be the mom I wanted to be for my child.
But intellectually, that was something that you were learning about already, right?
I mean, yeah. Yeah. But I do think that, again, in graduate school, actually a lot of my research, it's, again, looking back. So you're right. In graduate school, my research actually focused on the relation between uncertainty of having a child with a chronic illness and the relation between that uncertainty around their chronic illness and parental post-traumatic stress symptoms. And then I had a child where I had a lot of uncertainty in the delivery and I had a traumatic experience and I did view it as traumatic. And I'm I wrote my dissertation on this, goodness gracious. Again, but it's you can't be objective. People are going to be like, don't go to Alli. She's a terrible psychologist. But you cannot see yourself objectively. You cannot. You have to have support. So that's something I learned too is I can't be perfect just because I'm a child psychologist, just because I've done this research or I know these things intellectually does not mean that I know how to put them in practice for myself without support because I can't see the bigger picture. I see through my own eyes, right? Versus when I'm sitting with parents, when I'm helping parents, I can see their experience objectively. And it is very different. And I also, learning that I deserve to have support the same way that I believe my clients deserve to have support.
Yeah, that speaks volumes. And I just love summing it up with you cannot see yourself objectively. I think you can take that in a million different ways. It's one of those phrases where each listener will probably take that into a different lesson or apply that in a different way. But it really is true. It doesn't matter what your profession is. Mm-hmm. You are not able to turn that around to yourself. And so being able to go on your personal motherhood journey and knowing that is not something that you could have prepared for, you did not know exactly what those circumstances were going to look like to any degree. And you really just can't prepare. You just can't until you're in it. And then you can maybe find awareness or you can find acceptance, or you can find new levels of support, as a result. But yeah, it's so messy.
It's so messy. And I hate the mess, right? It's you kind of hit the nail on the head there with, it's just, you can try to prepare for everything. And that's kind of, I think that makes me vulnerable to developing OCDs because I don't like the uncertainty. I like to prepare for everything. and that uncertainty is like, it's the doubt disorder. But the what ifs, that's what keeps coming. What if, and you can't prepare or plan your way out of that experience. So it really just kind of, knocked me down. I was like, all right, Alli, like, get it together. But, and it's kind of like the work I do now, right? Like of this, like, can you see yourself objectively? No, right? It's the same way we look at our bodies, right? And we look at, we all criticize ourselves so much, right? There's just so much of that with body image in our culture, and with thinking that we should always be thinner, or be prettier, or that our thighs shouldn't touch, or whatever that is. And then you grow and you look back 5 years and you think, I look so beautiful. Why didn't I see that then? Right? Or I was so thin. Why did I think that I was bigger than I was? Like, we all do that so much because we just can't see ourselves objectively.
Right. And I love that segue, because I was just going to start asking like more about your work now. How did you get into the specialization that you're currently, working within?
Yeah, it's something that I've always woven into my clinical work in the therapeutic setting, because I've worked a lot with adolescents and young people. And one of the things that come up during that time is body image and confidence. And I also, I'm kind of a nutrition nerd, and I'm really interested in feeding. And that is just something else that I kind of had to work a lot with. So I worked with children with diabetes and their parents on feeding. And that's a group that's at high risk for eating disorders. And so, something that I did a lot, and I just became more and more interested in how I was seeing that just the adolescents I was seeing, it's hard to put into words, but so much of kind of some of what I was seeing there was their confidence and their self-esteem was impaired because they always thought that they should be looking differently, right? Like you go through puberty and maybe you gain some weight, and then I would see these kids that thought they needed to go on diets, or I would have pediatricians referring me families basically saying like, help these people eat healthier, basically saying, put this kid on a diet, which I did not agree with. And just recognizing that how this is ingrained in our culture, and we're passing these attitudes onto our children, and our kids, ourselves and our kids, we're developing these really negative relationships with our body and with food. And what two relationships do you have forever? Your relationship with yourself, with your body, and your relationship to the food that you eat. And if those are unhealthy or unfulfilling, then there's this domino effect.
Oh yeah. It's a huge part of life.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
So tell me more about the families that you currently work with. I know you work one-on-one parent coaching with families nationwide, virtually. What was their experience growing up where that leads them to you? Or what are their fears as they begin to parent that leads them to you? Or how do families know that they are kind of ready to embark on this work of working on their relationship with food and their kids' relationship with food?
Absolutely. So I really see kind of two different presentations. And one is often moms who have a negative body image, or moms who grew up with a negative body image or a really poor relationship to food, or perhaps disordered eating. And they are terrified that they're going to pass that on to their children. So they may say, I struggled with disordered eating. I always hated my body. I had terrible confidence. I always wanted to be different. How do I now raise children who feel empowered in their bodies, who love themselves just how they are, who don't want to alter their bodies, who know that they can go out in the world and be themselves? Kids who can eat pizza and eat candy and also eat broccoli and eat kale or whatever it is, and have the same neutral or positive relationship to all those foods and know that they all fit, and not have the guilt and the shame that so many of us have experienced for eating that slice of pizza, right? It's often moms, because women in our society are pushed a lot more than men to have a certain body size. And so I work a lot with moms around that. And part of that is learning, okay, so how do I maybe think about food and the relationship to my body a little bit different? Because what we know from the research is the way that we model these things in the home impacts the likelihood that our child will develop eating disorders, disordered eating, or go on diets. And it's a big problem. We act as if this is something that, we talk a lot about, healthy eating, versus maybe like this holistic view of what eating really is. And is forcing your kid to eat broccoli really healthier than teaching them that broccoli is part of their diet, just like pizza or candy or sandwich or hamburger or chicken nugget or whatever it is. And so we have to learn how to talk about food in a neutral way. We have to learn how to model body positivity in front of our children. And then, I also get families that are coming in whose kids are maybe already struggling. So maybe they're coming up to their parents and they're saying things like, I'm fat, or I hate my legs, or I hate my belly. And they're, using these in negative ways. And the parents are like, what do I do? Like, my child is beautiful and they're perfect. And how do I help them see that? And how do I help them be confident in the body they have? And some parents do have kids in larger bodies and they worry, how am I supposed to handle having a child in a larger body? What if they get picked on at school? What should I be doing? How do I talk to the pediatrician? It's all very nuanced and there's a lot going on, but those are kind of the primary parents that I'm working with now to empower them with skills so that they feel confident and clear in what to say and what to do in those situations.
So needed, and such an epidemic of its own in a good way of, parents realizing just the influence that they have and the power that this has over not only their life, but their child's life and even the generations to come in what doing this work can transform. So what types of mistakes or myths do parents come in with? Of course, just because of that they were parented, or that's kind of the influence that society has had on them. Where do they start that, you want to kind of right those wrongs of here's maybe what to think or understand instead?
Yeah. I think kind of starting with things that come from diet culture, which, diet culture is really this system of beliefs in our culture that tells us that thin is better, in that it tries, in regulating our eating, and eating in a certain way is better. And it doesn't always, those things don't always align with health, but are often disguised as health. And so there are a lot of little things that we might have learned to do growing up or as an adult that we think are healthy and we're passing on to our kids, but they're really related to disordered eating or to negative body image. And, one of those might be the way we talk about food. And so one of the key markers of eating disorders is dichotomous thinking or black and white thinking. So it's putting food in boxes. This is a good food. This is a bad food. And parents will, in a well-intended effort to teach their children about nutrition and health, they will say things like, oh, that candy isn't healthy. That candy is bad for you. Sugar's bad for us. That's why we don't eat a lot of it. And they'll say things like, broccoli is so healthy. That's so great. You're eating your broccoli, and so they'll put some things on a pedestal and some not. And so what they're doing is they're sorting foods into boxes, and children are developing, they're developing their view of the world, as we're talking about these things. And so they start sorting foods into boxes or creating schemas around these things. And that can get, that builds, right? And so again, what we know is doing that puts us at a higher risk for eating disorders and disordered eating. So I really like to help parents see that, that is not helpful like we think it is, because it doesn't really give our kids much to go off of when they're making choices, because they're still going to eat the candy, right? Like, it's delicious. They're going to eat it. But how are they going to feel after they eat it? They might feel ashamed. They may feel guilty. They may think, well, if candy's bad, then I'm bad for eating it. So we don't want that to happen. So what we can do instead is we can just talk neutrally about all foods, whether it's candy or broccoli, right? Broccoli is a food. Candy is a food. Candy is sweet, right? This broccoli is roasted. It's crunchy. Those are ways you can talk about it instead of, again, sorting it into those boxes.
That's a big, big principle that, is a really, really big pillar of being able to transform maybe the way that you have seen food up until now. And how to move forward with that relationship with food. Is there another similar kind of pillar to this approach that will help parents kind of understand the difference in the dichotomy of how to treat things?
Yeah. So, that's what I talk a lot about is just language neutrality. And we can also think about that with bodies, right? So one of the other big pillars is modeling. So the research shows that parents modeling impacts what children are going to do, what they eat, and how they think about themselves, and whether or not they diet. And so we can model for our children how to have a positive relationship with their body as well. And so it is so, so easy for us to do things like look down at our baby bellies, and say like, oh, when is this going to go away? Or to casually say in front with our kids listening, say something like, if I could just lose those extra 10 pounds, then I would be happy. Right? Or say, I've always hated my legs, whatever it might be, just little negative comments about our bodies that we grew up hearing, right? That our moms maybe said, or we heard on the TV, or we read in magazines. And I just really urge moms and, dads, parents to think about, what is your kid hearing, right? So your kid is hearing, my mom, the most beautiful person in the world, thinks her legs are too big. Well, what about my legs then, right? Especially if people say I look like my mom. And so maybe, be cognizant of that first, and then maybe think about, well, how can I model what I want my kid to do? So I want my kid to think that their body is strong and capable. So I'm going to say those things about my body now. I'm going to say, man, I am so glad I have these strong legs to carry me up this hill when we walk. Or, I am so glad that I have this extra, or that I have fat on my body to keep me warm in the winter, right? So it's just neutral. We kind of, instead of talking negative about our body, we're going to switch to neutral talk.
So powerful. Definitely not something that was modeled for us in a lot of families.
No.
So this is new territory.
It is. It's almost, I know I'm taking you, in all the directions with this, but, it can feel very overwhelming, right? It can feel like a lot to take on as a parent, and again, I don't want any parent, especially, women who have been through diet culture, to think that they're hurting their kid or that they are not doing a good enough job around these things. We do the best we can with what we know. And there are just a few, if you can start taking a few baby steps toward being kinder to your own body, modeling neutrality, that's great. That's a wonderful thing to help your child learn.
Yeah. One step at a time, one day at a time, one moment at a time, for sure. Yeah. It can feel like a huge weight, not like we don't already feel responsible for so many things about our parenting or about our, how we're impacting our kids. So this also feels like another area to fail in.
Yes.
So you have to look for those small wins, look for the progress, look for the things you're doing that maybe you wish, you would have seen, as a kid, and just being able to start there. So what are some of those, tiny wins, or maybe like a glimmer of hope in the right direction of momentum?
Yes. Yeah. And, I talk a lot about that. I talk a lot about, it's breaking cycles, right? It's breaking this cycle of self-loathing, or breaking the cycle of dieting, right? And, those tiny wins are things like being able to sit down with your kid and eat pizza and enjoy it, instead of counting the calories on your plate or thinking, I'm a bad mom because I let my kid have pizza. Again, no food has to be healthy or unhealthy. All foods can fit in our diet. And that's what we want to teach our kid. Little win would be being able to have dessert, again, without restricting it, without saying you can only have one piece. You can only have one cookie, right? That's a stressful experience. So getting to a place where you can sit down and eat dessert with your kid and enjoy it. Getting to a place where you can be proud of yourself, for serving broccoli, for serving whatever it might be that you have deemed as unhealthy before alongside broccoli, right? Getting to where that both of those foods are doing something for your kid.
Yeah, that alone is monumental if you can get to that space and you haven't been there in the past. And I know I'm sure you get so much resistance, maybe from the families you work with those fears of, are they going to be able to make good choices, in the future? Mm-hmm. Are they going to be able to be nutritionally sound enough to get, the things they need if they're just going to eat dessert all day? So, what types of reassurance do you give to those families?
Absolutely. I'm glad you asked that, because that's so important. So yeah, people think, well, if I let my kid have candy, they're only going to eat candy, or they're going to become addicted to sugar, right? Those are kind of some myths we hear. And what I will say is, and this is where we dive into the nuance of this when I work with parents one-on-one or in group setting, but it's about the way you serve candy, right? You do not, it wouldn't be appropriate. I have a 3-year-old. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to give my kid candy all the time. Of course, I'm responsible for making sure that he gets the nutrition he needs. But when I do serve it, how do I serve it, right? And does my child, research shows that when people feel restricted, they become obsessive. So if my child knows there's this thing out there called candy and he never gets it, or when he does get it, he only gets one piece, right? Or I give it to him and I'm like, oh, now we got to get healthy this week, guys. We've just been eating so much junk. We got to get healthy. Then kids will start to obsess about that thing they don't think they have, or they don't think they have access to. And so that's where we really get into the nuance of, okay, so how do we give them age appropriate access? How do we create value-based plans around what you served and make sure that they're getting all the nutrition they need and they learn to self-regulate, right? And it's like anything. If you want your kid to learn to self-regulate around sugar, you have to give them opportunities to self-regulate around sugar. It's a developed skill.
Yeah, it's a learned skill. Okay. Yeah, that's super important to remember and hard to remember, honestly, when like right off the bat, all we're looking at is, what got eaten or how they did today versus yesterday. And, we're constantly looking for things that can function as our report card as a parent because we don't, we're worried about it and insecure already about our job performance. So like we want to be able to say, okay, look, he ate all his veggies. Now I'm a good parent. I can feel like a good parent, or I can sleep easy tonight. And so when we don't get that feedback, it's very hard to give ourselves the pep talk of like, no, I'm doing the right thing in the long run because, I'm developing these skills for a better relationship. Yes.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, Danielle. We are in the long game here. It is not about the short game, right? And so we want to look across time because we're not raising kids who eat broccoli, right? We're raising kids who know how to feed themselves nutritious and unbalanced diets, right?
Yes. Yes. I can only tell that's going to be a quote. I'm going to put that on Instagram. Because that's really what, we have to be constantly thinking big picture.
Yes. And the same with our bodies, right? So it's like, we don't want to raise kids who fit the mold, right, of what they should look like, right? We think, oh, if I can help my kid, and a lot of parents won't want to admit this, but parents will think like, my kid is bigger. If they were smaller, they'd fit in more. They might think, well, if I help my kid look a certain way, dress a certain way, they'll fit in more. That's not the goal. The goal is to raise kids who are confident in who they are, regardless of the external expectations on them. And so again, we're going for the long game here. So how do we influence our children? How do we empower our children and build resilience so that when they go out and there is pressure on them to look a certain way, to, fit in a certain way, to eat a certain way, whatever that is, how can we buffer that effect so that they can remain true to themselves?
Yes, exactly. So important. And especially when they get into that adolescent age and, they're just trying to figure out who they are and, navigate those tough social situations we all don't want to go back to. And we feel for them. So for families that come in with, kiddos that are longer down the line and they already maybe have concerns themselves or the child themselves are expressing concern, what is kind of your first step to be able to help them and support them when they're out there?
Yes. With parent coaching, it's because I am a licensed psychologist, there always has to be a pretty good screening process to make sure that we're appropriate to work together so that we can work on that skill development for parents. But, it's really, and this is why, that one-to-one or that group setting is so beneficial because we can do a deep dive into what is your kid's unique experience? What are they struggling with? And then what do you bring to the table as a parent? What are your strengths? What are some things you want to build upon? And we can work together. What are your family's values? We work together to develop a plan around that. And then, if the child is struggling more with body image, then we start coming up with a plan. Okay, they're saying this. As a psychologist, I start thinking, okay, what is the antecedent? What is reinforcing maybe them seeking validation around the way their body looks? Okay, well, what kind of education might your child need, or that they don't have? What kind of skill development do you need that you don't have, to be able to talk about this conversation with your child? Because, sometimes parents, they freeze up. They don't know how to talk about bodies with their kids. It's such a vulnerable and uncomfortable topic. And so do we need a role play? Do we need to do some education? Do we need to do some skill development? But being able to, kind of hone in and really individualize that for the parent can be really helpful. There are a lot of preventative things we can do and a lot of universal themes that we talk about, but it is always helpful to be able to really look at family specific needs.
Because I'm sure there's no two kids that are experiencing the exact same insecurities because of the exact same lead in because of the, the exact same background. I'm sure that it's a very unique experience and you need unique solutions. You need to be able to see the nuance and be able to, look at things with flexibility in what those solutions could be and be reassured that, it's not going to be a quick fix. It's not going to be better tomorrow, but there are, indicators that we're on the right track, and just being able to put parents' peace of mind at bay, because then, the child thrives off of that vibe. And so if the parents build more confidence, then that's going to overflow naturally and automatically to their kids as well.
Absolutely. And that's such an important thing to state. Some of the research I did in graduate school, we looked at, how parental functioning impacts child functioning. And I mean, it's a pretty clear link that the better parents do, the better their kids do, right? They read, it's, basically, I mean, it's complex, but you just think even they pick up on so much. And so that can sometimes be part of it too, is parents are lacking potentially in the skills they need to help their child. And, and sometimes that might even be things like bullying. How, the way we were taught to handle bullies is a lot different than the way I, might approach a situation with body bullies now.
Yeah. And I'm sure it looks totally different too, because we're looking, for the guy in the playground, and now it's going to come through as cyberbullying, through text messages, or even just like straight up ignoring them. Like that's almost more damaging now.
Yes. I see a lot of that clinically with adolescents and young people and goodness, it's awful. It's terrible. And people on the internet are so quick to, with that anonymity, they're so quick to make comments about bodies. And even if you're reading comments and it's not about your body, but they're seeing comments about other people's bodies, like that's where we are doing the work at home to buffer them against that, right? So they see, this person is getting these comments about their body, right? We don't want them to go down that, rabbit hole. We want them to be able to come back to center and know that they are worth so much more than their body. And just because somebody says something doesn't mean that we need to start dieting or we need to start doing anything differently with our bodies.
Right. And just to remind listeners again that this is not something you're supposed to be automatically pre-programmed with before, a child was placed in your arms. This is not something that maybe comes naturally. Maybe it's even the opposite. It's something that you really, really, really have to work to overcome because of your years of conditioning otherwise. So don't spend that energy beating yourself up for not being at the place that you maybe would love to be, skill level for supporting your child. Put that energy into being solution oriented or growth oriented, or doing the research to find and equip yourself with more resources, because not only will you feel better, but your child will feel better. And that is the opportunity available to you with the technology we have and the ability to connect with people all over the world like yourself, in a space that is designed exactly for this work. So tell listeners more how to connect with you.
Yeah. So one of the best places to find me or connect with me is on Instagram at Dr. Delozier, PhD. So that's Dr. Delozier, PhD. And so that's kind of my platform of choice, where I try to provide kind of just, free education about how parents can help their children to develop a positive relationship with food and their body. You can also find me on my website at delozierpsc.com. And so that's another way that you can contact me. I am gearing up for a group soon that will be all about cycle breaking. And so that will be geared toward parents who want to really look at that nuance of what skills can I learn so that I can teach my children to have a better relationship with food in their bodies than I had, right? I mean, and I think of it like, what a gift, right? Mm-hmm. Can you imagine? And I can't assume your experience, but for me, if I had spent all the time, that I had spent worrying about my body or dieting or counting calories, like I could have like a Nobel Peace Prize, right? And that's the gift that I want to give my kids, is like, this is not a thing you have to worry about all the time. Like, let's put that energy into learning like trigonometry.
Yes. Just think of all the things that, it could take up your brain space otherwise. That's so powerful. So when is that group starting up?
You can DM me, or people can DM me on Instagram to get on the wait list. So probably have a round coming up around, January.
Perfect. Yeah. Okay. I will have all those links in the show notes so that they can go and stalk you and sign up for the waitlist and all those things if that's their next step that's on their heart. But I think that this conversation has been able to paint the picture of just a bigger vision of being able to support our kids in a way that we cannot discount the consequences of, and the ramifications of down the road of what a gift that can be to our kids, of just that, especially if you're in that prevention phase of being able to learn these things while there's still a lot more time to integrate it, when they're still in your house. So I think that's beautiful. So thank you for doing that work and for being so available to share that personal experience, because it's so valuable. And so keep up your hard work.
Well, thank you so much.
So the last question that I ask every guest that I have on is, how are you the mom that your kids need?
Yeah. So, I'll have to go with that theme of, I think I'm the mom that my kids need because I'm learning how to take care of myself, right? I mean, I'm learning that it's okay to invest in myself and to learn new skills and to not be perfect all the time. And that's the lessons I want my kids to learn. So I'm not quite, it's hard for me to say that, yes, I am the mom my kids need. I'm like, oh, well, I'm not quite there. But yes, that's why I'm the mom my kids need.
Yes. It's not always going to be a work in progress. We're not going to arrive and get the gold star and the trophy that, we finished growing.
Wouldn't that be something?
Oh, we would love that. Yes. But no, since that's not on the table, you're going to show up today and you're going to show up tomorrow and you're going to keep doing the work and keep, working on yourself and keep getting better and closer to that goal of continuing to learn from what they need from you, each day as you move forward. And that's the goal to keep focusing on. So thank you so much, Dr. Alli, for coming on. We so appreciate all your expertise and for the resource that you are in this world. And I'm just so glad that listeners can connect with you offline. And so thank you just so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great.
Yes. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Failing Motherhood. Your kids are so lucky to have you. If you loved this episode, take a screenshot right now and share it in your Instagram stories and tag me. If you're loving the podcast, be sure that you've subscribed and leave a review so we can help more moms know that they are not alone if they feel like they're failing motherhood on a daily basis. And if you're ready to transform your relationship with your strong-willed child and invest in the support you need to make it happen, schedule your free consultation using the link in the show notes. I can't wait to meet you. Thanks for coming on this journey with me. I believe in you, and I'm cheering you on.